one of the most important things about Swirl is the ability to connect to almost anything. And as the connectivity problem really fades into the past and everything has an API, the ability to connect to different sources through search providers is really a lot of what we're trying to do. And that's what we're going to kind of go into a little bit more depth here right now. I'm going to invite Erik Spears to join us. Erik is the head of support, and he's actually been working on a couple of new providers in addition to YouTrack. He's also got the Atlassian providers working. So Erik, tell me a little bit about what you do at Swirl.
I'm the head of support at Swirl. Ready to kind of help out anyone in the community who comes onto the Slack or opens a GitHub issue. I try to chip in on the product itself where I can. For example, working on some new search providers, and we'll see why I'm able to do that in just a minute without actually coding anything into the core of the product, which is pretty great. And I help out a lot running actually our YouTrack instance here at Swirl Inc. We use this product in-house. It's a project management product. That's actually a blurb and a screenshot from their homepage. That's an Agile board. We make use of those as well. We use it for issues or tickets, and we use it for knowledge base articles. Sid mentioned it has a very lightweight feel to it. That's a bit deceiving. It's a very powerful tool, but you are not sort of required to use all of that power at one time, which is nice. It's very customizable. So you're able to choose what you need out of the tool and make use of that. For example, we haven't kind of dove into reporting in YouTrack quite that much at Swirl, but at some point we will. As we've used it longer, we have more data built up. So that's kind of a nice aspect to it. So it's put out by JetBrains. If you're a developer and you've ever used IntelliJ or PyCharm, you know JetBrains. They make a lot of other IDEs as well. And they also make YouTrack.
I just want to say I love YouTrack, and actually the combination of YouTrack and PyCharm, which is also by JetBrains, is pretty amazing.
Yes.
So everyone will get to know Erik if you, again, come to the Slack and need help with anything. He will be the first person you chat with more than likely. So thanks for joining
Hopefully
us.
Hopefully so. Absolutely. Great to be here. Let's jump to the next one. We'll talk about search providers a little bit more in detail.
Tell me a little bit about what you've learned about them.
Yeah, this is great. I actually cribbed a quote from Sid here. This is from our documentation. Search providers is the essential element of Swirl. And in a sense, that's true. They do make it quick and easy to search many sources. And the key to that is without writing any code. Now, if you look at those screen grabs right there, it may look a little messy, but what that is basically just JSON. So once you've seen a couple of search providers, you're able to sort of take one of those and make another one out of it. It's not quite as cookie cutter as that, but it is definitely doable. And as of release 110, we ship with 2 pre-configured search providers for YouTrack, one to search their issues or tickets and another for searching their knowledge base article content. The way the source's API documentation, well, really the API itself, the search API is structured, will kind of dictate to you if you need one or more of these, but it's really not a problem in Swirl to make 1, 2, or 5 YouTrack providers, for example. So they're pretty great. They're what allow Swirl to connect to those multiple sources at one time. And using tagging, you can group them as you wish, which we'll see a little more of and what you saw Sid do a minute ago.
Hey, so I just had a real quick question. So you could create, for example, in YouTrack, it has the notion of projects, right? And you can essentially have totally separate users and different articles and types and all that stuff. So you could potentially create different search providers targeting different projects.
You could. We've made the example, what I call kind of the example providers that are included in the release to show off kind of what you could do in YouTrack are generic. They don't specify a project, but you absolutely could do that. If you had 5, 10, 20 projects, different user bases, you can manage all of that with different search providers. Absolutely.
Very cool. So what are the keys search provider when you're like thinking about trying to build them, right? Yeah. What are the keys?
So this is, again, a few of the high-level kind of important bits of a search provider that you need to be aware of. The first and foremost is, of course, authentication, credentials. How can you get in there? How can you talk to the API of the source? In the case of YouTrack, they use a bearer token, which is great. So any YouTrack user can go grab their own bearer or permanent token, I believe they're called in YouTrack speak, and use that to configure their own search provider. Other kind of common authentication systems are, of course, OAuth2 and some of the other ones that we'll be getting into in future releases of Swirl. But for now, bearer tokens are great. And there's a series of mappings. Sid showed you some of these. Query mappings, which are basic key value pairs and define a little bit about how you actually talk to the source and ask it for search results. How do you query it? For example, down there in the red, is it ampersand query or is it question mark query? Things like that are all, you'll find those in the API documentation of the source. But Swirl allows you to support a lot of that and to tailor the query that you actually send to the provider to suit the needs of that provider. And of course, to the user, what you're looking for. Result mappings are a lot of fun. That's where you decide what you're going to bring back and show. So obviously some of the fields are built into Swirl, as Sid showed you. We'd like a nice URL, we'd like a nice title, things like that. But that payload field, which I also highlight here, is kind of magic. You can bring back all sorts of interesting data in the payload field. And that also is really kind of driven by what the source will provide to you and then what you would like to see. What is your use case as a user of Swirl? So we have a lot of flexibility in here. There's more mappings. There's a bit more in a search provider than this, but these 4 elements are definitely some of the keys.
So tell us a little bit about this piece, right? How you actually figure out how to hook this part up, how to authenticate.
Putting together the Legos or the puzzle, choose your analogy, right? So it's some quality time with the API documentation of the source. In this case, those screen grabs are from YouTrack's API documentation. Their developer center is great, very well organized. They've documented very thoroughly, big help. So what sort of methods can you authenticate with? Well, they talk about their permanent token, right? How do you actually format that search query? What data is available to search? What is the source, in this case, YouTrack, call their issue titles or their article titles? Do they call them titles? Do they call them descriptions? What's the body content called? So you spend a little time getting to know the search API, and that will allow you to basically do the mapping exercise, connecting what the source calls it back to what Swirl is looking for. And that's how you can decide what you're going to show and highlight in your results. And I think the next slide has a big scary screen grab of a couple that that's part of it. I just wanted to throw that in there. That's a page each from the issues and the article API. It actually goes on. And you can dive deeply into those. Some of those are returned as nested JSON. Swirl supports a lot of that. Sometimes you're digging deep into some of those things to get out a value you want. For example, the status of an issue, right? Not something that's a built-in field in Swirl, but we can certainly show that on our payload once we find it in the API.
Major shout out
some
to
other things
JetBrains, right, for putting all this great doc up.
Indeed.
This is the key. The better the documentation,
absolutely,
it is to hook it up.
Yeah, they have great documentation. They do have great documentation. So when you start to put all this together, you end up with a result like this, right? So the info block on the left, you saw zoomed in on Sid's demo earlier, which is great. It shows that we can get results from both issues and articles in YouTrack. And then the screen grab on the right is actually a set of results I got the other day. That's kind of interesting because, as you'll see, the payload feels a little bit different in each of those. So things that might be of interest that I chose to highlight when kind of making these example providers are things I thought were useful to folks generally in an issue tracking system. Status of the issue, the current assignee of the issue, who might be different than the person who wrote it, right? They're going to show up as our author. Comments, we can pull comments out and display them from issues. We can pull subtasks out and display those in a Swirl result list, right? So even linked content and kind of related content like that, tags or labels in Jira, if you're familiar with the Atlassian world, YouTrack calls them tags. Those can come in here as well. Votes, a lot of issue tracking systems support votes, supportive agile processes, right? We can pull the vote count out and show that to you in your Swirl result. If that's something that's part of your use case and that you want to see. If you don't use votes, you don't have to show that in here. You just modify that payload field. It's very simple once you get into it.
Also love to highlight the fact here that, for example, the JSON path there under payload, right? Tags,
yes.
star, point name, that's actually going to aggregate. That could be a list. There could be multiple values. For example, a single issue could have multiple tags on it. So those will have those. And you can also map those back to a field if you want to, right?
Correct. Yeah, I chose to leave them in the payload for this example, just again to show folks what it would look like and what your options are if you choose to build one of these search providers or configure them yourself. You can definitely do lists. We've seen multiple tags. We can show multiple comments in there. You have 5 comments on your ticket. They will all the body or the text of those comments will show up in the payload field for you. We can link multiple subtasks. So yeah, groups of values like that, aggregates are definitely supported, and they work great in Swirl.
Awesome. So this stuff is, what's the status of this right now? 110.1 has the YouTrack?
110. No, YouTrack came out in 110, the release that's available now. We're getting very close to shipping a 1.10.1 point release, and that will have something very similar for the Atlassian cloud products, Jira and Confluence, those two. Very different API, very different, very different in a lot of ways, but they are available. They will be available as well. I think it's got one running here. Let's see how we do. There we go. We have a test Atlassian setup, so there's not a ton of content in it, but we do get results back from it, and we get articles or in this case, wiki pages and tickets. So that's coming in just another day or two. When 1.10.1 is fully out the door, you'll have those example providers as well. A lot of folks use Atlassian. That seemed a good combo to put out there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Erik. That was terrific. Please, if you haven't met Erik, jump on the Slack and introduce yourself. And if you're trying to build a search provider, he's your new best friend.
Be happy to help however I can.
Thanks, Erik. Thanks a ton.
You betcha.